It's stating the obvious to say that the Chicago Bears 2021 season hasn't been that great. At 4-7 and 4 games behind the Green Bay Packers in the NFC North, their season is basically dead. But that's not the worst of it. What's happening at Hallis Hall and the saga and bizarre twists and turns that we all experienced before Chicago's Thanksgiving game against the Detroit Lions, with Matt Nagy being kind of, sort of fired, maybe coach one more game and then leave. It was just so strange and so hard to comprehend that it made a season that's already been very, very disappointing for Bears fans almost laughable. I'm Bryan Perez with the Draft Network, here to talk about the state of the Chicago Bears. Look, the 2021 season started with about as much excitement and optimism as Bears fans have had in decades. The draft pick of Justin Fields in the 2021 NFL Draft, when Ryan Pace traded up with the New York Giants to select the QB1, the guy who was going to bring respect to the position that the Bears have been searching for, this never-ending quest to fix the quarterback problem in the Windy City. They finally had the answer, and Justin Fields has done everything to prove that the Bears made the right pick so far on the field. His stats aren't great, the wins aren't there, but if you've watched football long enough, you know when a guy at that position has it. And Justin Fields has it. So you can check that box for Bears fans to feel like the 2021 season, regardless of how this craziness that I'll talk about in a second ends up shaking out, they still got their quarterback. That's a huge win, and believe it or not, that's almost as big of a win as the team winning the Super Bowl. That's how hard it's been for the Chicago Bears to find a quarterback. But let's get to the coaching side of the aisle for a minute, where this Matt Nagy pre-firing before the Thanksgiving game became almost like the butt of every joke in the NFL leading up to Week 12. And to be honest, that's the worst place for an NFL team and a fan base to be in, when it's so embarrassing, so downright ludicrous that you can't defend the franchise, you can't defend the coach. There's nothing a fan can do to stand up and demand that their favorite team be given at least even a small amount of respect. This rumor that Matt Nagy was told by Bears ownership that he was fired, but hey look, do us a solid, coach one more game on Thanksgiving, be away from your family, by the way, on the holiday which is supposed to be all about family and giving thanks and gratitude. Put all that aside while you're fired, come coach one more game for us, and then pack your stuff and leave. It was so ridiculous to believe at the time. I actually tweeted extensively about it, how these rumors are just mind-boggling, and the fact that there were some respected members of the Bears media actually running with it was shocking to me. Nevertheless, that's the era we live in. That's the new, Twitter, social media. It's more about being fast than being accurate, right? Well, what we found out soon after is that those reports weren't accurate. Matt Nagy wasn't pre-fired, but still, the fact that the Chicago Bears have a reputation where it was kind of believable that they might actually do this to their coach goes to show where this team has kind of devolved to over the last few years, especially in the Matt Nagy era. The Matt Nagy era that, if you remember, back in 2018 began with such promise. The coach of the year, the NFC North champions, a home playoff game against the Philadelphia Eagles, which ultimately led to quite possibly what cursed this team, the double doink. If you think about it, the Cody Parkey double doink when he missed that playoff kick and sent the Bears home packing for the rest of the offseason, Matt Nagy's never been the same. This team hasn't been better than 500 since. And this year, it's really hard to imagine that they're going to be at or above 500. The double doink sent shockwaves not only through the entire city of Chicago, but apparently through Matt Nagy's coaching brain as well. Look, he's been downright terrible as a head coach for the Chicago Bears over the last 2.5 seasons. The offensive-minded guru that he was lauded to be, he's been anything but. His offense is, let's look at the numbers here, 3rd fewest yards per game on offense, the worst offense in terms of passing yards per game, the 4th worst offense this year in points per game. This is just horrible. This is as bad. This is like Mark Trestman, John Fox-esque team. So clearly the writing's on the wall. Clearly Matt Nagy is going to get fired. It's going to happen at the end of this season unless the miraculous happens. and the Bears go on some unbelievable run down the stretch and finish 9-8, let's say, and sneak in as a 7th seed, maybe even a 6th seed. If you take a look at the NFC playoff standings right now, it's wacky. I mean, you have a traffic jam of 5 and 6 and 4 and 7 teams from the 7th team all the way down to where the Bears are at 14th. That basically means the next month and a half of football, it's up for grabs. It's anybody's seed to have. But look at the Bears' schedule, right? If we're being realistic here, look at the Bears' schedule. They come out of the Detroit win, which, I mean, if you watch that game, are you really telling me that the Chicago Bears feel like a playoff team after barely beating the winless Detroit Lions? And honestly, the Lions looked like the better team for most of the game if it wasn't for the ridiculous stretch of penalties they won on. But, hey, a win is a win. So the Bears moved to 4-7, but now their next 2 games, we're in a point in their schedule where every game is like a playoff game now. They have to win every single game from here on out. Next week, Arizona Cardinals in Week 13, the number 1 seed in the NFC, followed by Sunday Night Football at Lambeau Field against the Green Bay Packers, the number 2 seed in the NFC. If the Bears go 2-0, it's time to build some momentum. It's time to get excited if you're a Bears fan, right? Every team in the NFL, every fan base in the NFL, every talking head around the league and NFL media is going to pay attention to the Chicago Bears if they move to 6-7 with wins like that, those quality wins against the Cardinals and Packers. But it's not going to happen. Okay, look, it is not going to happen. The Bears are not going to go 2-0 against those teams. And really, if you want to circle a game where there could be some potential truth to Nagy actually getting fired in season. Remember, this is such a big deal because the Chicago Bears, a charter franchise, they've been around for over 100 years. They've never fired a coach in season. So just the concept of the Bears firing Matt Nagy before the end of the year would literally break a 100-year streak from this franchise of never doing something like that. But if you want to circle a game in which that 100-year streak could actually come to an end, it's the Sunday night game against the Green Bay Packers in Week 14. Because if the Bears get absolutely embarrassed and annihilated and laughed off of the field against their biggest rival on a nationally televised game, which will not be flexed out of primetime, by the way, it is happening on Sunday night. If the Bears embarrass themselves on that stage, that's the game I'm circling. That could be the last one that Matt Nagy coaches for the Chicago Bears. If he's competitive, or maybe the Bears even win, Matt Nagy will live to see another day. And it's only going to continue extending what has been such a weird year for Bears fans, such a weird year for Chicago football. But again, we circle all the way back to how it began, and it allows Bears fans to hold on to that hope, to understand that better days are coming with Justin Fields. It's just a matter of getting out of the rut of 2021, getting into the 2022 offseason, and letting the Justin Fields era officially kick off. But for now, it's the circus continues in Chicago, and it's going to be a fun and entertaining circus to watch, especially over the next couple of games when the Matt Nagy hot seat gets as hot as it's been since he arrived in Chicago in 2018. You can follow me over on Twitter at Bryan Perez NFL, and make sure you're coming back to thedraftnetwork.com every single day for your best NFL and NFL draft analysis.